we begin our novena to Our Lady of Divine Providence, we reflect on the first and foundational virtue, humility. Humility is the key that opens the door to all other virtues. It is the virtue that shows us to recognize our dependence on God, acknowledge our limitations, and approach Him with a heart of gratitude and openness. Our Lady of Divine Providence is the perfect model of humility. Throughout her life, Mary lived a humble obedience to God's will. This is beautifully expressed in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 1, 26 to 38, through the account of the Annunciation. In this passage, the Virgin Mary's response to God's call is a powerful example of the humility that God desires in each of us. When the angel Gabriel announces God's plan for her to become the mother of the Savior, Mary responds not in pride or reluctance, but with a simple, trusting yes. She simply accepts God's will for her life, saying, "I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word." Mary's response reveals the true beauty and strength of humility, a complete openness to God's plans, no matter how unexpected or challenging it might seem. Her humility teaches us that by surrendering our own desires and embracing God's will, we open ourselves to His grace and allow His purpose to unfold in our lives. Pope Francis has often reflected on Mary's humility, reminding us that she is not only the Mother of God, but also a model of every Christian. He writes, "Mary is the Virgin of listening, the Virgin of humility, says yes to the Lord without asking anything in return." Humility is the strength that allows her to be the true servant of the Lord, who endures the mystery of God's love with faith, with obedience, and with total trust. Through her yes, Mary shows us that humility is not weakness, but a profound trust in God's plan. Mary's humility is seen not only in her acceptance of God's will, but in how she perceives herself in saying, "I am the handmaid of the Lord." Mary doesn't put herself down. Rather, she affirms that she is God's servant, open and willing to do whatever He asks. Her humility is a recognition of her dependence on God, knowing that He is the source of her strength, her purpose, and her mission. To illustrate this humility, I would like to share a short story. There was once a young woman named Maria who had always dreamed of becoming a teacher. She had a deep love for children and a desire to make a difference in their lives. After years of studying and preparing, she finally landed her first teaching job. On the first day of school, as she stood in front of her class, she felt nervous, unsure of herself. The children looked at her expectantly, and she could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But as the days went on, Maria started to notice something important. Every time she faced a challenge in her teaching, whether it was a difficult lesson plan or a troubled student, she would pause and say to herself, "Lord, help me." Slowly she realized that the best moments of her teaching weren't when she had all the answers, but when she acknowledged her own limitations and trusted that God would guide her. One day, a fellow teacher commented on how humble Maria was, always willing to ask for help when she needed it, and how her students seemed to thrive under her care. Maria smiled and said, "I'm just trying to do my best and trust that God will make up for the rest." She understood, as Mary did, the true greatness comes not from self-sufficiency or pride, but from surrendering to God's plan with the humility and trust. This story echoes the virtue of humility that Mary exemplifies. Like her, Maria recognized that her talents and abilities were not her own, but were gifts from God, to be used in service to others. She didn't seek glory or recognition. She sought to God's will in the small, every day of her life, as Mary did. Mother Elena Bettini, our founder, had a profound understanding of divine providence and humility. She taught her sisters to trust in God's providential care for them, just as Mary did. One of her reflections on humility, we understand that humility is the key to open the door to divine providence. When we surrender ourselves completely to God, He becomes our provider, and nothing is lacking in our lives. Like Mary, we must learn to say, "I am the servant of the Lord," trusting that God will lead us to the fulfillment of His plan for us, no matter the obstacles. Mother Elena emphasized that true humility is not about neglecting one's dignity, but about recognizing that everything, our lives, our talents, our future, are in God's hands. Mary's humility showed to be open God's providence, even when she could not understand the full scope of His plan. Pope Francis also reminds us that humility is the path to joy and peace. The humble person, he says, knows that they are part of something much bigger than themselves, and they find joy in serving others. This is precisely what we see in Mary. Her humility is not self-critical, it is life-giving. By saying yes to God, she becomes the Mother of Divine Providence. bringing Christ the Savior into the world and giving us an example to show how to live in service to God and others. As we reflect on Mary's humility, let us ask ourselves, how can we, like her, say yes to God's plan for us? How can we trust in His providence even when the path ahead is unclear? May we follow her example of humble service, open to God's will, and always willing to say, "Let it be to me according to your will."